After years of researching and schooling, he realized that the majority of what is taught about nutrition is dead wrong. Hello, and welcome aboard another episode of the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast. This is your captain speaking, Taylor Morgan. On today's episode, we have another special guest, and his name is Bryan Charles. Bryan is the founder of KetonedBodies and the host of the PurposeDriven Plate podcast and restaurant. After years of researching and schooling, he realized that the majority of what is taught about nutrition is dead wrong. He became a certified Primal Health coach and is currently working on his master's degree in applied clinical nutrition. Through KetonedBodies and the PurposeDriven Plate, his main focus is to help you apply nutritional education to your daily life. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. So I think a good place to start off, or where I would like to start off, is I asked my Instagram following if they had any questions when I was going to interview you. And I would like to start off with this one because I have this question as well.
Okay.
From Optimized Life Nutrition. That's his Instagram. Okay. So clearly interested in optimized life nutrition.
Yep.
Is it possible to feed large populations with regeneratively farmed meat?
So that is a myth that is perpetuated by the industrial food system. And the Rodale Institute has answered this question for about the past 35, if not 40 years. We actually had Jeff Catch, who is the operational director, I think, for the Rodale Institute on the podcast, and we covered this specifically. And what they found, first of all, let me tell you about the Rodale Institute. They set out to answer that exact question. Will regenerative agriculture produce as much food as industrial agriculture? So they took this piece of land, they split it into two lots, and on one side they do industrial, on one side they do organic, or beyond organic, something that we would define as regenerative. In year after year after year after year, they found out that regenerative agriculture produces as much food, if not more food, than an industrial way of farming. Additionally, one of the things that people don't consider is that 2/3 of the land's mass is not even suitable for crop production. And the only thing that can be grown on there would be grass. We can't eat grass, but ruminants can eat grass. So if you went in a regenerative fashion, not only would you produce as much food, if not more food, on what's being used for cropland right now, but you would bring larger tracts of land actually into the food production system through the grasslands, which would give you the ability to produce even more food. On top of that, you wouldn't have as many, or you wouldn't have any industrial inputs whatsoever. So when you get to the bottom of it and you see where that myth is coming from, that myth is coming from an industrial system that is scared of losing their hold on the food production system. And so they are out feeding everybody this BS that, we need this way of farming because this is the only way that will feed the world. And the Rodale Institute set out to call them on their just, utter bullshit. And lo and behold, year after year after year, they've shown it to be BS. And so to me, it's upsetting that that's even still a question that's out there, because here it is, perfect natural experiment. And other people have done it too, where they've taken their tracts of land, they've gotten so much yield when they were doing an industrial way of farming, and then they switched to regenerative agriculture. And everybody out there is like, this is a better way of farming. It produces healthier food. You can see the carbon being sequestered in the soil. And guess what? We're producing as much food, if not more. And it's a way of being completely independent of this just, horrible industrial system. So when you hear that, like, you always have to consider the source. Where is that coming from? It's not coming from real world farmers who have made the change themselves. It's not coming from real institutions like the Rodale Institute, which is absolutely, I would say, an academic institution, in that the way that they're going about answering these questions is on an academic, research level.
So if the Rodale Institute has been saying this for the past, 35 odd years, why do you think that this information is not more widely available? Is it
The
just because
outright corruption, no ands, if, or buts about it. This isn't even like, oh, these people have good intentions that are in these food companies and they've just made a mistake. This is an outright attempt to defraud and deceive and ultimately corrupt the food production system. People don't seem to understand it, but food is how they control us first and foremost. Like, no ands, if, or buts about it. This is how they control our health. I mean, not even physical health, but I would also say mental health, spiritual health. I mean, every last aspect of your life starts with what's on your plate. That's where I got the name, the purpose driven plate, for my concept. And the whole my nutritional philosophy, not just my nutritional philosophy, but my just outright philosophy is, I don't care what the problem is. I don't care what the question is. I promise you, you can trace the solution right back to your plate. And they know that, and that is how they control us. And if that gets away from them, then they have no control over us whatsoever.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
I would say when I was creating my program, I kind of fought back and forth with which was more important, sleep or food. I ultimately came to the conclusion that sleep was more important, but you could make the argument either way. Like, if you're not sleeping 7 hours a night, like, it could be because of your food, but we go
Yeah.
back and forth on that all the time. But food is absolutely playing a role in everything in your life.
Well, you can't. So here's the issue though. You can't isolate anything. Nothing exists in this universe in and of itself in a vacuum.
It's all a
So it's
system.
this, like, yeah, of course. So it's this whole like reductionist way of thinking, trying to be like, oh, if you take this one magic pill, you'll do this, you'll do that. And nothing exists like that. So you can't sit there and say that sleep is more important than food or food is more important than sleep. You have to understand how they work together in this whole holistic process. So you can't sit there, it's kind of like you're looking at it from, it's the same coin, but it's from different sides. You can't sit there and say that my side is is a more like honest reflection of the coin than your side. It's the same coin. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like, is sleep important? Absolutely. Is nutrition important? Absolutely. But what's extremely important is how they work together in this congruent, symbiotic fashion. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you can go out there and get the best sleep in the world, and you're going to have a crappy diet and you're not going to benefit from sleep. And the vice versa is true. You can go out there and you can have the best diet in the world, and if you're only sleeping 2 hours a night, guess what? You're not going to get any benefits from your diet. So if you want to get the benefits from sleep, you have to have a good diet. If you want to get the benefits from having to have a good diet, you have to have good sleep. You know what I mean? So it's all, there's no competition in nature. There's only cooperation.
100%. And that's why I became a holistic lifestyle specialist, is because I started off as a CrossFit coach, and it's like, these people were coming into the gym and they're like, hey coach, why am I not getting better? I would ask, okay, how's your sleep? How's your nutrition? How's your stress? And it's like, okay, I'm sleeping, if I'm lucky, 6 hours. My diet is pretty good. And as you and I know, anybody who says pretty, it's crap.
Yeah, you already know.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, you can't just isolate one thing, like you said. You have to focus on the whole entire system, hence, holistic.
Yep.
And while I was creating my program, I was like, okay, kind of creating a hierarchy. Obviously, all of it's important. You have to focus on all of it. But instead of giving them, a whole bunch of data and word vomit, like, do all of this right now, I kind of created a hierarchy. And so, I probably should have clarified with that. And so my next question is, if it's so obvious that you can, feed these massive populations with regenerative farming, and it's actually better for everybody, the environment, us especially, you mentioned it's just the corporations. You think it's their greed, just because they have so much money and they're able to put out more to advertising dollars to kind of blunt the facts that are coming out of like the Rodalians?
I mean, it has to be sheer greed. I don't know, whatever else could be it. I mean, it's very simple. I mean, like, ask yourself a question, like, when have these corporations ever actually, truly cared about our interest? You understand what I'm saying? It's like, they could sit there and say, oh, well, we do, but it's like, even if they're showing it any sort of concern for our actual interest, it's only because it will make them a dollar. If you take away the profit, they wouldn't care about our interests at all whatsoever. So you sit there and you just when you go to a regenerative agricultural farm and you see how it is this complete independent food system that has no sort of external inputs at all, and it's just operating in this beautiful natural independent fashion, and you see how it's the farmer and anybody that's working on the farm, anybody that's buying food from the farm, those are the people that are benefiting from it. And you start to understand how corporations in no way, shape, or form could benefit from that relationship between, a consumer and a farmer and the environment. And you start to understand that all of our food could be produced like that. And then you look at sort of these economic facts that companies like Cargill, I forget the other big names, these are giant, massive, like mega corporations, like bigger than, so many, corporations out there, and nobody's even heard of them. Nobody's talking about them. And then you find out that they're not even publicly traded companies, that they're still private companies. You know what I mean? It's just like, whoa, like, what's going on here? Like, everybody knows about Apple, everybody knows about Microsoft, everybody knows about Tesla, everybody knows about all these giant companies that have an impact on our lives, in a daily, on a daily basis. And you say, well, wait a minute, the impact that these food companies have on our lives, it's even bigger. And these companies are just as big, or who knows, they might even be bigger. And yet nobody's talking about them. Nobody's talking about the influence that they have on politics. Nobody's talking about, I hate to get into politics, but you know what I mean? Biden talking about, oh, we're going to cure cancer. Oh, we're going to, do this for the environment, yada, 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 all this nonsense. And then you put Tom Vilsack, whose nickname is Mr. Monsanto, in as the agricultural secretary. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, Monsanto is responsible for glyphosate. And if there is one substance that has released more carbon into the air than fossil fuels, if there is, one substance that has destroyed human health more than anything else, it's glyphosate. So everything that he just said about the environment and health and all this stuff just got flushed down the toilet as soon as he put Tom Vilsack in there. And you know what I mean? Like, where's the uproar? You
And
know what I mean?
for
Like, yeah, where's people talking about that? And that's the most important thing that he's done thus far. And nobody said a damn thing about it.
for everybody who doesn't know what glyphosate is, can you go into a little bit on?
Roundup,
Yeah.
Roundup. Glyphosate is Roundup, and it is Monsanto's top seller. I've seen charts where they showed a direct correlation between the amount of glyphosate that was sprayed in China and the amount of COVID outbreaks. And when you start to understand like the human immune system and how it's dependent upon trace minerals, and then when you understand how the trace minerals get into the food through the microscopic life in the soil, and then you understand how glyphosate kills that microscopic life, and you say, oh wow, well here's something that if it's affecting you and you're a normal person, you have a healthy metabolism, it's like the flu. But then there's so many people out there where it's not like the flu, it's a death sentence. And you say, oh gee, I wonder why that is. And then you look at the quality of food and how there's no zinc, there's no magnesium, there's no trace minerals, which are just these absolutely elemental parts of our immune system functioning properly. And you see all this glyphosate that's in the food and 70% of the drinking water in the United States. And it's just like, why is anybody surprised that this is happening? We will never be healthy so as long as our environment and our soil is unhealthy. And they can try to, give you health in a pill, give you health in a shot, give you health in some packaged food, whatever it is. And it will never happen so as long as that product is coming at the expense of the environment. That is, to me, is the main message of regenerative agriculture. And there will always be, these industrial attempts of, oh, we're bigger than nature, we're smarter than nature, we can get around nature, and nature's always just going to sit back there and just laugh, and teach us a lesson the hard way. So when you look at the chronic, diseases in the United States, whether it's diabetes, whether it's heart disease, on and on and on, you look at what's happening with COVID. This is nature, you know what I mean? Just showing us that, hey, you will never be bigger than me. You made a mistake 10,000 years ago when you became farmers and you started growing food in a manner that came at the expense of nature and of the environment. And this, to me, is just the culmination of the lesson.
Agreed. And
So,
that pretty much sums it up. I feel like this could have been a 15-minute podcast. That was basically it.
yeah.
Yeah, but I guess, we defined what Monsanto does with glyphosate, what that is. I
Mm-hmm.
probably should have started this podcast with the difference between regeneratively farmed meat and non-regeneratively farmed, because a lot of people haven't heard about this, because like we said, it's these huge corporations greed that are like blunting the marketing of it, and saying that it's not that big of a deal. So you want to go into a
Yeah.
little bit about what the differences are?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I don't answer everybody's questions, just to give you a heads up, a really, really good book, which kind of, outlined the difference for me, was called excuse me, not the Purpose-Driven Plate, the Omnivores Dilemma by Michael Pollan. And up until that point, like with, my meal prep company, we were using organic, we've always used organic produce. We were using grass-fed meat, whatnot, this, that, and the other. But I always had a hunch in the back of my mind that I was just like, even though this is 100% grass fed, even though this is fully organic, I still just didn't trust it because it's coming from, these large vendors. And then when I read The Omnivore's Dilemma, lo and behold, Michael Pollan broke it down. And Michael Pollan is an investigative journalist for the New York Times. And, he even makes the point, like, why is an investigative journalist having to even dig into the food system in America? Like, that right there should show you that there's a problem. And so he was going to follow from basically the field to the plate 3 different meals. The first meal was going to be an industrial meal. The second meal was going to be an organic meal. And then the third meal was going to be a meal that he hunted and gathered. And in the process of this, he found out that there's a difference between the organic food that's in places like Whole Foods, and then there's a difference between the organic regenerative food, whatever you want to call it, that comes from places like Polyface Farms. And what he found out is that in the 1960s, the organic food movement was the regenerative agricultural food movement, and that the corporations saw that they couldn't make money off of this, and that this would affect their bottom line and basically cut them out of the equation. And so they hijacked the organic food movement, regenerative food movement, whatever you want to call it, and they turned it into the organic food movement that we now know of. And so what they've done with the standards is that, organic food nowadays, I mean, even if it's true, I mean, there's not a lot of transparency in labels, but let's just say that it is true. Organic food just means that there aren't harmful pesticides, there aren't harmful herbicides, things that are going to be harmful for the humans, things that are going to be harmful to plants, and things that are going to be harmful for the environment and animals. It's not supposed to be in the food. But what it's not is, it still is not a way of mimicking how nature grows food. And the best example is what goes on with the microscopic life and the relationship between nitrogen in the atmosphere, nitrogen in the soil, and then nitrogen ending up in the plant. So you can take an organic form of nitrogen fertilizer and you can put it in the soil, and you can say, hey, you know what? I didn't use a synthetic fertilizer. Everything's all good. It's organic. It's a natural substance. And lo and behold, you still aren't going to have healthy food. And the reason why is there's microscopic life in the soil that will take nitrogen out of the air, and it'll fix the nitrogen and it'll turn it into a form that the plant can actually use. And then the microscopic life will make an exchange of that nitrogen with the plant for things that are called exudates. And the exudates are simply just molecules of glucose. That's significant because every molecule of glucose that that plant is making and trading with that microscopic life, that's carbon being taken out of the air and actually put into the soil. And we'll get to that in a moment about all the significant effects of having extra carbon, in your air. But what we've also found is that there's other microscopic life in the soil that will actually secrete enzymes that will break up the bedrock underneath the soil. And this is how you're getting the trace minerals into the food. So if you're coming in and you're putting down this organic phosphorus, organic potassium, organic nitrogen, and whatnot, it is somewhat ending up in the food, but in the same token, you're compromising the carbon coming from the air going down into the soil. And then you're also killing that microscopic life because there's this whole big, like, interconnected web, this other holistic universe that takes place in the soil. So if you kill one member of that soil universe, chances are there's this whole big downstream effect. And it's the downstream effects that we really don't know about. And it's ultimately compromising the quality of the food. And then on top of that, if you're doing it in that manner, even if it's organic, it's still an industrial process because it's you as an individual that's putting all of those elements there. More inputs equals more outputs. The difference with regenerative is you're saying, okay, how am I going to harness the energies and the systems of nature so that all the nitrogen, all the trace minerals, everything that we need to grow food is being put in by natural processes. And when you do it in that manner, you get the regeneration. and it's equivalent to where everything that you're taking from the land, it's equal to everything that's being put back. And that is the only true definition of a sustainable system. Even if you do have organic fertilizers and things of that nature, they still are being mined. They're not being taken in a fashion to where whatever's being taken is equal to what's being put back. So organic food does not mean healthy food, and organic food also does not mean sustainable food.
Mm. So, because I didn't necessarily know this, I thought regenerative just necessarily meant meat products.
Mhm.
Or is produce, can that be grown
You
regeneratively too?
can, yes, you can do produce regeneratively. It's not that it's harder. It's that you have to understand, like if you have a piece of land, okay, if you're growing plants on it, you're taking all the nutrients from the soil. And in order to grow plants on that soil again, those nutrients have to be put back. And this is where this whole relationship between plants and animals and like crop rotations comes in. And this is why I am adamantly opposed to a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet, because in order to have plants, you have to have animals. And in order to have animals, you have to have plants. And it's this whole symbiotic process of how one is feeding the other. One is regenerating the other. And the best example I always use is the example between cows and grass. So you look at the cow, and the cow is eating the grass, and you say, okay, the cow is taking us, the grass is providing an input to the cow. But in the same token, that grass then generates manure, and that cow is also feeding the grass. So it's just like, the relationship between sleep and nutrition. You can put this divider between the two, but if you put the divider between the two and you're looking at this linear process, you're missing the entire equation, that it's actually this holistic process. So if you are growing vegetables in a regenerative fashion, and there are farms like Apricot Lanes down there in Southern California, you have to have the animals to restore the fertility from the land. And you can't repeatedly and continuously just take, you know what I mean, as plant crops, plant crops, plant crops, plant crops, without putting things back. You can put things back, like we said, in an industrial fashion, or you can see to it that nature is putting things back in a natural and ecologically sound fashion. The other corollary of that too is that, plants also have desires. They don't want to be grown in these massive monocropped fields. If they're grown in these massive monocropped fields, that's why they're not as healthy. That's why you need pesticides, herbicides, and all these things, because it's not a natural setting. If you look at Rome Ranch in Texas, they have buffalo, they have turkeys, they have, all these animals that they're raising in regenerative fashion. And they also have their garden, and they call it their Garden of Eden. And it's just like Gabe Brown, where they're going out there, they're taking a certain plot of land, and they're saying, okay, we're going to take this out of the rotational grazing right now for the animals. And they're just throwing seeds all in the land. And then they show it, and it's the coolest thing in the world, because it just looks like this big overgrown mess. And then they're pulling back these leaves, and here's this vegetable over here, and here's this vegetable over there. And that's just like Gabe Brown does it up there in North Dakota. And Gabe Brown allows you to come in and says, okay, if you want to go out there, go pick whatever vegetables you want, come back. He weighs them. So you're going out there, you're having this awesome relationship with the land, you're standing on the soil where your food's coming from, and it's helping him out, because there's no giant tractors, machines, whatnot, this, that, and the other. Like, that's a natural way of getting food.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah,
Sounds
no,
like I need to
absolutely.
book a trip to North Dakota.
Well, you can Apricot Lanes doesn't have that down there, but I know that they are regenerative organic certified. I don't know that part of regenerative organic certified. I mean, it's not monocrops, but they still will have rows. They'll have like a row of this vegetable next to a row of this vegetable. I personally don't agree with that. I still think that's a natural process. I'm of the process of Roan Ranch and like what Gabe Brown is doing, where it's just like, throw some seeds in a field. And the cool thing about it too is once they pick the vegetables, they have the animals then go in thereafter, and the animals will take, what they call the fodder crops, all the leftover, parts of the plant that are there, and they're eating it, and then they're taking it and they're returning it into a matter that, ultimately gets returned to the soil.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Jeez. Yeah, I didn't know that produce could be that way too, but I mean,
Yeah.
of course it can. That's how nature, wants it to
Intended.
be. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so for listeners who their minds are blown right now, they're like, holy shit, I eat organic, I eat grass-fed. I thought that's like the epitome of
Yeah.
food. Like that is health. And even myself until very recently thought that. So
Yeah.
why is eating regenerative a big deal? Why should people care about that? What are some of the benefits of eating regenerative?
Well, I mean,
Physical and environmental.
if you care about your own personal health, you obviously are going to want to eat the healthiest food out there, and that is only food that comes from regenerative agriculture. With my meal prep company, the motto is only food grown in a manner that regenerates the soil will regenerate the body. And when you start to understand that relationship, you start to understand that if you are a nutritionist, you're also an environmentalist. And what's best for humans is also what's best for the environment. And you absolutely cannot separate the two. And that's why I tell people over and over again, like, health will never be a product of industry. It'll always be a product of nature. So if you have a supplement, if you have, a pharmaceutical, a shot, a vaccine, a food, anything in front of you, and you want to know, is this healthy? I promise you, all you have to do is just ask, what was the impact to the environment? And if the impact to the environment was negative, I don't give a shit what the claim is from whatever supposed expert, whatever they're telling you. I guarantee you, time in, across the board, no exceptions to the rule, it will not be healthy for you. No ands, if, or buts about it.
And when you say healthy, can you define that a little bit? Because obviously, like 100% grass-fed and finished meat is light years ahead of, factory farmed crap.
Yes.
So can you define what you mean when you say
Well,
health?
like one of the people we get chicken from is pasture bird chicken, and they've had their chicken tested. And we were talking about this before. And every last thing that's supposed to be in chicken, I mean, whether it's, B vitamins, whether it's even ATP, which if you're working out and you're a bodybuilder, you sure as hell know what ATP is. That's the cell's currency. Their ATP levels are like 6 times higher. All the B vitamins are like 4 times higher. They have a lower omega-6 ratio, more omega-3s, like everything that your body needs for optimal health, optimal nutrition, everything that your body needs so that your body doesn't break down and you look like, Mark Sisson when you're 68 years old, 69 years old, is in food that comes from regenerative agriculture. It is a myth that our bodies are designed to break down. I mean, if you think about it, why would nature give you a body that's designed to break down, that would make you dependent upon others or dependent upon a group? Our bodies do not break down when we have an optimal diet. We're meant to die from a rock falling on our head, from a wild animal attacking us, things of that nature. Our quality of life is not supposed to diminish as the years go on. And that has only started to happen when we became agriculturalists. And that's why Jared Diamond, the author of Guns, Germs, and Steel, an absolute must read for anybody, even if you're not necessarily into archaeology and whatnot, it'll still open your eyes to nutrition and how it's impacted our world. But Jared Diamond said agriculture was the worst invention of mankind.
Yeah, for those of you guys who don't know Mark Sisson, go Google image search Mark
Absolutely.
Sisson
Yeah.
like shirtless, and you will
Yeah.
be flabbergasted. Like
69 years old. I know.
that dude's a
69 years
badass.
old. I know. Absolutely. That's why I became a primal health coach. And that was really what put me on my journey too. I went into my chiropractor's office and he was telling me like, oh, I'm getting on a ketogenic diet, this, that, and the other. And I remembered being in my kinesiology class in college, and my kinesiology professor telling me how bad ketogenic diets were. My mother at the time was on a ketogenic diet, and I went and convinced her to get off of it. And he put me on a real information, and I just was like, holy shit, like, what did I just do? Like, my mother now has Parkinson's, and Parkinson's helps with keto. Like, what if I didn't talk her out of a ketogenic diet,
Keto
20
helps with
something years ago?
Parkinson's.
Absolutely. Yeah. No ands, ever
Yeah.
buts about it. Like, it was that immense guilt, in that just immense anger and frustration with the misinformation that's out there, and it's being done for the wrong purposes, that just made me open my eyes. And I saw Mark Sisson, was just like, well, there's the proof in the pudding. And that was my first thing, was I became, a primal health coach, and I started my meal prep business to make a ketogenic diet, accessible to my mother, because like I said, I felt that guilt for talking her out of a ketogenic diet 20 years earlier because of what I learned in college in my kinesiology class. And to know how much keto diets helps, with Parkinson's, I still wonder to this day, you know what I mean, if I didn't, talk her out of, there's no telling, how much quality of life, you know what I mean, that I personally could have impacted my own mother, all because of misinformation that's out there. And that was just like, you know what I mean? Like, how many other people have done that? How many other people are continuing to do that? And it's just been my own personal crusade, you know what I mean? Like, ever since, like, ultimately, I'm a little boy who loves his mom. And I feel guilty as shit because I went and absorbed some misinformation, and my mother loves me and trusts me. She thinks I'm smart, and she ultimately trusted me, and she got off of a ketogenic diet. You know what I mean? So to me, it's just like, you know what? I took this away from my mother, and now it's like, you know what I mean? Like, I want to give it back to her. And it's just, the corollary of that, I guess, the kind of symbiotic thing too is, look at what we've all taken away from Mother Nature, in our planet. And this is, our penance, and this is how we can give back.
Yeah, it makes me sick. The amount of just complete and utter disregard for waste, just consumption of like plastic. And like one of my former clients, Michael Lother, he has an apparel company, a sustainable apparel company. And every month we go out and do a monthly beach cleanup. And it's sad that
pictures.
It's sad that we even have to do that. But the beaches are covered in crap.
Yep.
And all of his shirts are, made out of, I think he uses recycled plastic, which is still not the best because you still get some of the microfibers.
Yeah.
But that's the best option that he's been able to find so far. Makes everything in the US. No plastic. But I think part of the problem with what's being taught in the school system is that usually, universities and medical doctors are like decades behind the current research.
Yeah.
Because it takes time for that stuff to be integrated into their teachings. And so it's not necessarily that they're spreading intentionally misinformation. It's just that that's what they were taught. But since they learned that, times have changed. Specifically with nutrition, new studies are coming out all the time, but it makes sense that, just go back to the basics. Regenerative farming is how nature was intended to function. So obviously that's going to be what's best for us. And I learned something, or, in my kinesiology class in college, they taught a lot of stuff that I was like, I don't think that's true. Like based on what I've learned myself, through self-learning, that's not accurate. But, and that's why it's so important to not put so much emphasis on, an actual like college degree, but, self-teaching, as long as it's from a credible source. What are some of you mentioned some already, but some of the most credible sources for information in this area that you would recommend to people?
Anything with the Savory Institute. Amazing book is Alan Savory's book, Principles of Land Management, of Holistic Land Management. It's not just about land management, though. It's really about teaching you the principles of a holistic system and how it operates in nature, and how you can learn from the philosophy of nature and you can apply it to your own life. It is an unbelievable book. It will impact you in so many different ways. Like, I was a philosophy major, the first thing I did in college, and I can tell you that book, as far as my worldview, my own like personal philosophy, that book has impacted me probably more than any other book I've read in my life. So it's not just about, holistic land management. It's about, holistic life management, I guess, you know what I mean? If you want to describe it as that. So anything by Alan Savory. I would also go with Defending Beef. That is another like powerful book. She's an attorney, former environmental attorney, vegetarian. She, used to hate cattle, all this, believed all the nonsense that's out there, and then dug into the information like an attorney, but not just like an attorney, but as an objective person. And that book, Defending Beef, how anybody still believes that beef is bad for the environment, bad for health, whatever claim you have against beef, it doesn't matter. She takes it and just destroys it, rips it to shreds. So that's another, really great, impactful book. Also, Cows Save the Planet. And then, above and beyond that, step out of the classroom, step out of the books, like go find a local farmer that's practicing regenerative agriculture, go out there, buy directly from them, stand directly on the land where your food is coming from, pick up that soil that's produced your food. And I promise you, you're going to get what Michael Pollan calls the full karmic load of food. And that's something that, a lot of people ask me like, oh, I want to go to the grocery store. How to know if it's regenerative, this, that, and the other. And I'm just like, well, if you're looking for a label, you're kind of missing the point. Labels are something that's necessary in an industrial food system because there's a disconnect between the person that's buying the food and the person that's producing the food. If you go directly and you buy from that farmer, you don't need a label. The only thing you need is full transparency. Who cares if that farmer isn't certified organic? Who cares if that farmer doesn't have any certification? If he's inviting you onto his land and he's showing you how the food that you're purchasing from him is being produced, that's all you need right there. And it's going to change you. You're going to feel better with what you eat. I mean, like I said, like it's not just nutritional content. There's also that karmic load coming in. And once you experience that, there's just no going back. And you're going to go into a grocery store and you're going to look at things in a box and in a package, and you're just going to have chills go down your spine. You're going to be like, wow, like how did I ever eat that before?
So you're saying not to watch the vegan documentaries on Netflix to get your information?
Yes, 100%, totally. What's a really good documentary just came out is Sacred Cow. Sacred Cow is written by Diana Rogers. She's a registered dietitian. She has lived on a regenerative organic farm for, God, I think the past 20 years. She's personal friends with Joel Salatin from Polyface Farms. Very, very intelligent woman. Very, great documentary. We had the producer, James Connolly, on the podcast. Really, really informative guy. His handle on Instagram is the Primate Kitchen. I don't know why more people don't follow him when it comes to like just absolute information about the food industry and food companies. And it's just like utter nonsense, like bullshit that they pull. That is a person that just like there isn't a better person out there that's better at belittling the food companies and food industries and calling them out, on their on their bullshit. He's a really, really great source. So, also, Sacred Cow, but guess what? Sacred Cow isn't on Netflix. So, gee, I wonder why. They'll put the vegan documentaries up on there, but something like Sacred Cow, they won't.
Yeah. I recommend Gaia. Are you familiar with
Okay.
Gaia?
No, I haven't seen that.
Well, it's not a series or show. It's
the concept Gaia. You mean like as far as the planet being alive, or?
I'm not familiar with that, but that's probably
Okay.
what they named us after.
Yeah.
Gaia is basically the personal development Netflix.
Okay.
So it's got, are you familiar with
okay.
Dr. Joe Dispenza?
Yeah, of course.
It's got his series Rewired on there. It's got all this other nutritional stuff,
Okay.
or educational stuff on there.
Okay.
And so yeah, we subscribe to that, and so we watch that.
I don't even know about that. I'm gonna go watch my first episode or show or whatever on Gaia tonight, man. So thanks for that.
Yeah, check it out. It's like I think it's $100 a year.
Okay.
I did the yearly subscription. You could do monthly, but I was like, it's worth it. So,
it's worth it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question. You kind of already answered it with the labels, but my girlfriend especially wants to know because she also has, sustainable organic meal prep company. So she's kind of where you were when you first started organic, what she thought was sustainable, 100% grass fed. We're always doing the best we can with quality, but now that we have this information, it's like, oh shit, now we got to step up our game. So her question was going to be, how can you tell if you're getting regeneratively farmed meat versus, regular factory farmed, grass fed stuff?
So, I mean, number one is definitely have a personal relationship with your farmer where transparency is, the ultimately deciding factor rather than a label. I personally don't trust labels because labels can be hijacked. They can be, like USDA organic doesn't, so watered down doesn't mean anything anymore. One of the certifications just came out though is Regenerative Organic certification. Patagonia is behind it. We talked about Patagonia's story before, but Yvon Chouinard is just an absolutely amazing person. Like he 100% cares about the environment. And I even spoke to Regenerative Organic certification, and they said, because, my whole hunch was that, the food industries would come along, they would try to hijack these regenerative terms again so that they could water them down and, turn them into something they can make money off of. And Regenerative Organic certification was like, yes, that's exactly it. This is why we trademarked the term, copyrighted the term, and we've set our own standards so that when people see this Regenerative Organic certification label, they know that it's gone above and beyond organic in that it has, soil health matters, things of that nature in there. You can also, once again, if you're following the Savory Institute has the Land to Market program, something which is what we are a part of. And in order to be a part of that, you're donating, 1% of your revenue to them, but you also have to source, from farms that are participating in their soil and environmental, qualities. So it's just, first and foremost, I would say go, have a personal relationship with your farm. Like, this is your health. This is your most valuable possession. If you can't find time for your most valuable possession, but you can find time to, buy new shoes and a new phone and all that other stuff, I just say your priorities are pretty fucked up right there. So, maybe just do a priority check. But obviously, first thing, go have a direct, connection with your farmer. Above and beyond that, go out and educate yourself. Look at Regenerative Organic certification. Look at the Savory Institute Land and Market program. There are, you can go directly to Polyface Farms website. You can order food directly from them. And if you're getting it directly from the farmer, guess what? You can afford regenerative food. You might not be able to go into Safeway or Whole Foods and afford, their supposedly expensive, fake organic food. But guess what? You can afford to get chicken and beef and pork from Polyface Farms. Like, I promise you, you can. Like, it's not that much more expensive. It's probably the same price as what you're already getting in the store right now. So, like I said, it's food. Like, go out there, learn yourself, like actually invest some time and energy into your health.
Yeah. So what are some of those other I was going to say organizations, but that's what we're trying to get away from. But those
Yeah.
those other companies out there who sell regeneratively farmed meat, maybe if people don't know the local farmer or don't live anywhere near anybody or whatever
Yeah.
the situation may be, what are some of those other companies that you suggest looking into?
I mean, as far as certification goes, the only ones that I know of are Regenerative Organic certified. They're calling it ROC for short. Other than that, Savory Institute. Other than that, I mean, there's really no accreditation agencies that I know of. So it would have to be something that you were looking at yourself, to kind of say like, okay, are these people, really regenerative? And you can go and you can look at their website, and kind of see what they're about and, see like, okay, are they just using these terms, or do they really have pictures of, them actually doing rotational grazing, having the chickens follow behind the cows, things of that nature. It's, like I said, if this is something that's important to you, which it absolutely should be important to everyone, as soon as you uncover that first little, clue, it's just going to turn into, a firestorm, and it's just going to catch you, and it's going to be contagious. And, I promise you, like, you won't stop. You'll find it, so interesting, and it'll just mean something to you.
What about like US wellness meats or Bel Campo?
You know what? US Wellness Meats, I think, is legit. Bel Campo, I think also. I don't know everyone out there. I just know the people that we source from. And like I said, it's generally new, so it's not like there's this well-established network of knowing, the quality of everything out there. But I'm pretty sure US Wellness Meats. But then again, like we were talking about this before, just because it says it's 100% grass fed and 100% grass finished doesn't mean that it's healthy, and doesn't mean that it was done in a regenerative fashion. In order to keep up with the demand for grass fed beef, farmers are going out there and they're spraying external sources of nitrogen on their field. And even with that, they can still put that label on there that it's 100% grass fed and 100% grass finished. But guess what? That is still an unnatural product. It wasn't done in a manner that really mimics nature.
Yeah. With that being said, let's talk about voting with our dollars, because I heard this on your podcast, and this is definitely something that's very important. We mentioned politics earlier.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, go vote, great, whatever. But what you can really do every single day, whenever you make a purchase, is vote with your dollars. So you want to talk a little bit about that concept?
Yeah, so my I guess my political view is very pessimistic. I think democracy is just an utter failure. I think that if the founding fathers looked at where this country has gone with its democratic system, they would be like, well, you know what, let's go back to the drawing board because we've failed. And I don't just say that, just my uninformed opinion. Like, I've corresponded with Gordon Wood. I love American colonial history. I have read, graduate level books on American colonial history. So, I would have to say I'm a pretty informed political person. And, I believe that democracy is a failure. Instead, I believe in something that's, a consumerocracy. And we participate in a consumerocracy every day with our dollar. And we decide what kind of world we live in every day with our dollar. I think that, they feed us the pipe dream that how we vote really does matter, so that we feel like we're participating in this democratic system. And I think it's kind of like, a magician's trick where they're trying to distract you from the real power that we have. And ultimately, a true democratic system comes, with our dollar. So if you don't like Monsanto, you can complain about Biden putting him in office. You can be like, oh, in 4 years, I'm going to vote Biden out of office, and all this other crap that you think is going to have a move. But the reality is, if you just went out there and said, you know what, I'm going to do some research in any product that in any way, shape, or form has any connection to Monsanto, I am not going to buy that product again. And guess what? Who would care if Tom Vilsack was in office anymore? Because Monsanto would be out of business and there would be no influence coming from Monsanto anymore. And, that to me is the real power, is that ultimately the yoke that is upon us is the yoke that we are putting upon ourselves. The government, no institution, nothing external can put that yoke on us. Like, we choose to put that yoke on ourselves, and we do that every day with our dollar. It's like when you talk about regenerative agriculture, I also think that it's an economic solution, because you think about it, these food companies, they're evil, they're destroying the environment, they're destroying our health, on and on and on and on and on. And it's us through our purchasing decisions every day that gives them the power and keeps them around. If we all went out there and said, you know what, screw these companies, they're evil, I am not supporting them in any way, shape, or form at all, they would just go. They would just disappear, because they can't force us to buy these things. We make these choices, and we make these choices because we don't care. We don't spend enough time. We want to be lazy. We want to, sit down on the couch and watch TV and all these other things. And it's like, if you're going to do that, in my personal opinion, you really don't have a right to complain about the world that you live in, because you are doing this to yourself. And ultimately, that's the core principle of regenerative agriculture, is that everything is a symbiotic relationship. And, Dr. Joe Dispenza, like, he's talked about this before, like, the universe is a mirror, and whatever energy you put out is exactly what you get back. So if these governments, if these evil economic institutions are putting this yoke upon ourselves, it's only because of that energy that we are putting out into the world. And if we will make different choices to put out different energy through our economic purchases, through how we're voting with our dollar every day, the world will change. The world is never going to change through politics. I don't care what anybody says. You can look at all these political systems, since the dawn of civilization, and politics are ineffective. But what is effective are personal micro decisions that come every day through how we vote with our dollar.
Yeah. I feel like we could have ended this podcast at multiple different places, that being one of them.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I 100% agree. I've said this for months now, like, the future of successful businesses, because that's kind of what I focus on. But
Yeah.
the future of, just living a happy, healthy, fulfilling lifestyle for anybody out there is going to be based on people who care. First, people who care about themselves being healthy, happy, and productive. And if you're a business owner, people who care about their employees being healthy, happy, and productive, not just, hiring them and thinking that they're your slaves, actually taking care of them, making sure that they're happy in their personal lives so they can do good work. So caring about those two things, caring about your community in some way, shape, or form, whatever that is. Whether that's your consumers, your local community, giving back, volunteering, helping in some way. And then caring about the planet and your impact that you have on the environment. I think in order to be a successful company, in order to live a truly fulfilling life, you have to meet every single one of those areas. So for people out there who think that, yeah, I've got the health dialed in, I take care of myself, I have good relationships with my family, but they don't give a shit about the environment. I really don't think that they can live a fulfilling lifestyle, because like you said, the energy that you put out there, you get back in some way.
Yep.
So you want to talk a little bit about how regenerative agriculture is helping the whole environment, and how the corporations are basically doing the exact opposite.
So I guess the biggest thing you have to understand is that when you eat food that's grown in a regenerative fashion, it's putting carbon back where it belongs, and that's something that I'm borrowing from Defending Beef, Nicolette. And she said, if there was a bumper sticker for beef, it would be beef. It puts carbon back where it belongs. So being in California, fire seasons, everybody says, "Oh my God, it's horrible." Well, guess what? That's directly related to what we've done to the environment, specifically taking ruminants, the giant elk off of the land. And we're taking away an environmental input that these grasslands evolved with for millions of years. And when these grasslands had the ruminants on them, the carbon content of California grasslands was at about 6 to 7%. It's now at 1%. That's significant with fire season, because for every 1% increase in carbon content, you get an additional 25,000 gallons of water stored per acre. So do the math, 150,000 extra gallons of water stored on every acre in California. That's a lot of water. Now you don't have fire season anymore, because that water stays in the ground rather than being floods or erosion, or runoff. It stays in the ground, and the plant will use that water in the hot summer months to perspire, so that the energy from the sun is actually splitting water molecules and turning it into vapor rather than radiating back as heat. And then when you have enough water vapor in the air, you start to have thunderstorms in the middle of summertime. So you have the short water cycle, and then you have the long water cycle, and they're both dependent, and they're connected through the carbon content that's in the soil, and that is dependent upon the choices that we make with how we grow food. So if you eat food that comes from regenerative agriculture, it's healthier for you, it's healthier for the environment. And that's what I said before, like, you can't separate one and the same. If you care about your personal health, whether you know it or not, you also care about the environment. And if you care about the environment, whether you know it or not, you also care about your own personal health. Like, we are connected to the environment. We'll always be connected to the environment. Industries can come along and try to sell us technology and make us, feel like we've disconnected ourselves from nature and from the environment. And, that's a lesson that we're all going to learn the hard way. That's a lesson that I think the world is learning the, hard way right now. I think the tension and everything that's going on in the world right now is ultimately intuition about us knowing that we are not bigger than nature, that this is not a sustainable system. And it's ultimately the pressure of an unsustainable system about to crack. And everybody is, scared shitless. And that's ultimately where all this tension is coming from. And it's just, it's no coincidence that regenerative agriculture is starting to make its comeback right now at this point where it's absolutely necessary, because this system is about to crack.
Boom. 100%.
Yeah.
So yeah, speaking of voting with your dollars, let's talk a little bit about the PurposeDriven podcast and restaurant, and your
soon to be restaurant. Yeah. So we're going to start a PurposeDriven plate eatery. We're going to have the fully prepared meals in there. We're going to have a butcher counter. If you want to come into and you want to get a meal, you can come get a meal right then and there. And then we're going to have the podcast studio in there. So it's, we want to hit people wherever they're making a decision to vote with their dollar, whether it's food they want to make themselves, whether it's food they want to have when they go out, or whether it's food that they want to have fully prepared to eat at another time. We want to give them, complete accessibility. It's a regenerative eatery. Everything's coming from local California farms. And then we also want it to be an informative place. We want people to come in, have podcasts being filmed just like this, where you can sit down, you can get a meal, you can feel better about the food that you're eating, because, maybe there's things that you didn't know about that food before that podcast, and just kind of give people, the motivation that they need to feel like they're part of a community, and let them know that, this is a growing movement, and this is a growing movement that, is going to not just change the world, but this is the movement that's going to save the world.
Yeah. 100%, because the way that we're going currently is just, it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. And,
not even
it's
close.
and it's about to crack, and they're
Yeah.
feeding us BS. You know what I mean? We can save you with this. It's all this, another industrial solution about, oh, well, this industrial problem has come up, and oh, here's another industrial solution, which creates another problem, on and on and on and on and on. And eventually just gets to a point where you're just like, yeah, you know what? Enough is enough. I don't think you guys really have the solution. So
They just want the money.
they just want the money. Absolutely. Yeah.
Not that making money is a bad thing. Making money is absolutely not a bad thing. It's your intentions behind making that money. That's why
Yeah.
I personally don't work with anybody in my program who just wants to make money and, get better for selfish reasons. They
Yeah.
have to be giving back in some way, shape, or form, like whether that's to
Yeah.
their own family, or like one of my favorite clients to work with, I probably shouldn't say that publicly, but was Mike Lothar, that guy we talked about with
Yeah.
his company Puka, because he donates 10% to our local Ocean Institute and to
Yeah.
the Wounded Warriors Project. Like that kind of stuff is
Yep.
people who I support, because like, yes, making money is good. You got to live your lifestyle, but also help other people. And it sounds
Yeah.
like you're absolutely doing that. So
Well,
yeah.
if you think about it, if all you do is take without giving back, eventually what you're taking and taking and taking is going to run out. It's not sustainable. Like you can, and that's how we've lived with each other. That's the relationship that we've had with the environment. And we're getting to the point where the inputs, what we're taking and taking and taking, is running out. That's why there's conflict in the world, because it's a zero-sum game. Resources are limited in a zero-sum game, but in a holistic, regenerative, symbiotic relationship, they're not.
Yeah. So with all that being said, you're clearly on the good guys team with all this. So tell people more about where they can find you and what you're up to.
So I have the meal prep company, KetonedBodies, spell it 'cause it's hard, KetonedD as in dog, and then just bodies, BODIES.com. We do fully prepared ketogenic meals. All the animal products are, from regenerative farms, local farms here in California. The produce is just organic, because that's all we can get right now. We're hoping to eventually be able to source with regenerative organic products. And then I have the podcast, the PurposeDriven Plate. Here in a couple months, we will also have the Eatery up in Northern California, hoping, to become a franchise, whatnot, and just kind of, spread that message all over the place.
Boom. Love it.
So
if that becomes a franchise, that will be my new favorite restaurant.
there you go. We'll get you set up with one in Southern California, man. What are you talking about?
Sweet.
Man? Yeah.
My favorite restaurant before this, which is now closed down, and I interviewed him for my podcast, Jason Morgan. He collaborated with Mark Sisson. So the name of the restaurant was Primal, and this was in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. All 100% organic, which, at the time, that's the best they could get. All 100% grass-fed meat, Himalayan sea salt, they deep fry their chicken in avocado oil, no bad oils, like all good stuff. And I was very disappointed when it ended up not working out. So if this becomes a thing, I will 100% support that and look into become an affiliate, possibly.
Awesome. So
yeah, awesome. Well, Bryan, it was wonderful to have you on the show. I really enjoyed this, and I hope the listeners got a lot out of it. I hope they listen and actually not just listen, but actually go out and do something about it. Educate yourself, contact your local farmer, things like that. So any last words that you want to leave them with?
Thanks for having me on, Taylor. And I don't know what else to say. It's, everybody's looking for the big decision to change their life, but ultimately it's, the little small decisions to change your life. So even if it's just, give yourself one meal to start with, where it's like, I'm going to have a regenerative meal, and then give yourself one day a week, and then give yourself 1 week out of the month, and just slowly build up to that. And before you know it, you'll be, like what we call our customers, you'll be a regenitarian, so forget this whole dichotomy about vegetarian, this, that, and the other. Become a regenitarian instead, and just micro decisions will ultimately, be what gets you there.
The only step that counts is step one.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
Just start.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Bryan. Well, like I told you, I got to get to my sauna appointment. Looking forward to that. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah. All right. Have a good one, Taylor.